Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning into the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams. Daniel, good to see you today.
How are you this morning, Dr.
Good.
Paul?
Recovering because I've had to watch everything ever said about impeachment. Just kidding, of course, but I tried to keep up a little bit. But it's over, so we can start relaxing. He's been impeached, so it's over and done with.
Yeah.
And yet you'd think after all that work, 2-3 years, even before he was president, they've been trying to impeach him. Yeah. I've never heard of trying to impeach a president and when he wasn't even supposed to win. But anyway, he's been impeached. Of course, now if you really want to get to him, you got to have a trial. You know, this legalizes the trial. But here I hear the announcement now that Pelosi might be holding this up. She's not rushing over to the Senate to deliver the documents and why they impeached him. So, but to me, the interesting thing is she is holding back because she wants to make sure that they follow the Constitution and that the trial is fair. She wants it more aligned with the fairness of the House approach to the impeachment. So that's where we are. So who knows what's going to happen. It might be their way of easing it out. But I think Trump probably is more in the driver's seat than any of the Democrats will ever admit, because all he can say is all that, and they're not even taking it over there and making and mocking it. So that's where impeachment stands today. So I guess we'll have to at least comment on it once in a while for a couple more months.
Well, I get Trump's marketing emails for some reason, and he started mailing. His people started mailing out last night. They're mailing on it. They love it. And in fact, we put an article up from our friend Nebusha Malich today, and this is a good headline, and it's worth reading on Ron Paul Institute website. By impeaching Trump, Democrats have made him more powerful than they could ever imagine.
Right. And just think how much publicity he got in the campaign and all. They didn't have to pay for billions of dollars worth of publicity. He has pretty good name recognition. So. But anyway, I want to talk about a subject we've talked about a whole lot, and that has to do with foreign nations and our responsibility to them and protecting them. And the one item I want to start with is South Korea and the United States have been talking, and the Trump approach was there: make them pay more. We're providing all these services, and so they've been in negotiations, and it sounds like the South Koreans are saying, we'll agree to. We've been paying $800 million, so we'll bump it up to $1 billion. But that isn't what Trump was thinking. He says, we want $5 billion. So maybe he wants to make a profit on it. But anyway, that's where it is. But I just want to talk a little bit about the process, where they are on that, and what we think might happen. But once again, this might be a good sign of us losing our clout to force other governments on what to do, and telling them how we will take care of them, and as long as we give you a lot of money.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it's really sort of an example, I think, of not just Trump, but all of this bubble called Washington really believing its own hype. It's such a bubble there. But the deal ends at the end of the year, December 31st, for the U.S. troops being housed in South Korea, 28,000 U.S. troops. South Koreans pay money each year, as you point out, and they've been paying $800 million. We're trying to strong-arm them for $1 billion, and then all of a sudden the Trump administration comes into the agreement, or to the negotiating table, and says, no, that's going to be $5 billion, which is a six-fold increase, 600% increase in the cost of protection that we're providing South Korea. The justification was, hey, you guys are rich, you can afford it. Essentially, is what it is, and it's really a lack of understanding of the market, which is not surprising coming from Washington. But according to polls, only 4% of South Korean citizens believe their government should meet those terms. So a really small percentage. If they hand over that cash, it's going to be really a serious political issue for that government.
Good, it should be. But I think why we're being putting in a more difficult negotiating position is the fact that I think the value of our protection isn't what it used to be. It's less valuable, it's less efficient, and therefore they're arguing back. And I think this is good, because there is a limit to what we can do. I thought we were way beyond our limits, both philosophically and monetarily, and it's a big contribution, to our deficit. But I think the value of us throwing our weight around and telling them how to live, putting on sanctions, even on allies get sanctions, the sanctions and all the tariffs going on, and I think from the old days, we're in a weaker position now to tell South Korea, pay up $5 billion or else. I don't think that's going to happen, because, like you say, maybe they'll just talk a little bit more with China. My goodness, they might even want to continue their negotiation with North Korea. And of course, that fits into my argument. Why did we ever stay? We finally got booted out of Vietnam. Yeah. And that was a blessing for the Vietnamese. Sad for the tragic end of our foreign policy there. But here we've tried to manage that whole thing, and we still do tell the South Koreans and the North Koreans what they should be doing. I don't think it's going to work, and I think we're not as in a good negotiating position as we had been in the past.
Yeah, and we both have lamented the fact that Trump has been an enormous disappointment on foreign policy. Sometimes he'll say something that's pretty close to the right thing, and then he'll do something else. But I think here, inadvertently, he might be doing us a favor, those of us who are non-interventionists, by pricing U.S. protection out of the market, as you say, if you look at it from a purely market issue, because the value of the protection is going down, and the price is going up. And what do people do in a market economy when that happens? As you say, the South Koreans are talking to China now. They're talking to North Korea. They're realizing that, hey, we may not need this 28,000 troops here to keep the Chinese from attacking us, because we may actually just start doing business with them, and it's a win-win for everyone. So it is really an interesting situation.
And you know what? The people who disagree with it will say, oh, you do less and we don't protect them and build them up, the Chinese will take over the world, the domino effect and this sort of thing. And they'll argue that. But, if we had our way, we would just discontinue all military ties with people. I mean, the antagonism that we promote, even with China and going into their neighborhood with our war vessels, it's just looking for trouble. But I think we should discontinue all the military associations with these countries, have a somewhat different, relationship with China, and also to increase trade with both all the countries. Increase trade, get rid of these sanctions, and do that not only with South Korea, but North Korea as well, because I think they would welcome it. They would get together. I often thought what got my attention was when they first talked about maybe allowing the South talk to the North, that families wanted to get together. Families would want to go across, and they would, and they'd have these meetings. And the more of that would happen, the sooner this whole mess would end. But I think since the price of our protectionism is going up, maybe they'll give up on that, because protectionism and protecting of sovereignty comes from the own people.
Yeah. Well, the Chinese go around the world doing business. We go around the world putting in troops. Who has a smarter foreign policy? It's simple. But here's something, this is the Australian Herald Sun, and we saw this because it was in a linked article from antiwar.com, which we read every day. But this is what the Australian Herald Sun is worried about if they don't reach a deal. Here's a quote: "If no deal is reached, the most immediate effect may be on the thousands of South Korean citizens who work for U.S. military who could be put on unpaid leave." These thousands of jobs, and
and that reminded me of the end of the Second World War, because I remember the pronouncements. I even remember my mother saying, people worry about us immediately returning to the Depression, because they had gone through the Depression, gone through the war, and all of a sudden, guess what? Spending crashed because they were out of the military business, and taxes went down, and everybody had jobs, and they were rebuilding from what was lost in the Depression and the war, and there was a huge boom. So these people were employed. They didn't become unemployed because the war was over. What a stupid assumption. Oh, the unemployment rate was finally solved at the end of the Depression because we had this world war and everybody had a job.
Yeah.
What nonsense. And there's still people who talk like that, in the military-industrial complex.
Yeah.
And we've heard some people high up in office even give the politicians trouble when they say that, where are these people going to go? These are jobs. This is a job from military Keynesianism, and it's still alive and well, but it's stupid politics and stupid economics.
And just think of the thousands of actually productive jobs that would be created if South and North Korea were able to end this ridiculous how-many-year war. Think of all of the North Koreans, and because of their goofy economic system, I'm sure are starving literally and figuratively for economic investment and opportunity. High-speed trains, all kinds of development. The South Koreans, they'd have to import people to do the work. So
and it's worse than just denying funds being used by people in the free market. What the government does generally, and in military, they spend money on things that cause more trouble. Domestically, it's more regulations and mischief and distortion of the market. In the same way with these need to manage trade around the world and protect individual sovereignty of all these nations. So it's a double loss. One, the people are denied the use of the money, and then how the money is spent is not a jobs program. That's where the real fallacy comes. That you end up spending money on stuff that causes more harm than good.
And I think some of these countries are realizing the U.S. military presence there prevents peace. It doesn't promote peace. And another place this is happening, I think, is Iraq, where, remember when Trump announced we're going to get our troops out of Syria, but we're going to put them in Iraq. And Iraq said, hold on a second. We don't want to host your troops. We don't want you there. And that's where they're turning. They've already got legislation in. They've put in that they want the U.S. troops out. They don't want more troops in. They'd like the U.S. to go. The protection of U.S. troops in Iraq has most definitely lost its value.
I do want to mention, since time is running short, on another subject, a subject very similar, of course, but a different point. And this comes from the National Interest, and the headline says, "Blurred lines. Does Pompeo have the authority to fight Iran for Iraq?" Now, isn't that the height of absurdity? First, why do we get involved about a war between Iran and Iraq? Oh, we have a tradition. We did that in the 1980s. We did a real good job. We encouraged Iraq to attack Iran back then, and it didn't work out so well. But then the other thing is so ridiculous. Why is it this Pompeo guy? Why does Pompeo have this authority? And then they talk about where do authority comes for war. It never says the American people. By a declaration by the members of Congress. There's war and wars declared or fought under the UN declaration, NATO, what we might do as a nation, and Trump's involved in this too. It's the whole thing that goes on. But the truth is they don't have authority to do that. They shouldn't even be discussing it. And when we do go to war, things get a lot worse. But that thing has been building up. I think this is one place. If Trump is definitely separate from our views, is when it comes to Iran. That one, it probably means that it probably symbolizes one of the great dangers too, because he's not going to back away from that.
And that's one of the reasons why the troops are less welcome in Iraq now, because the Iraqis realize, hey, they're not here to protect us. They're basically using our country as a staging ground for the desired war with Iran. And so that's yet another example of where they want U.S. troops to leave. And in fact, I think they announced yesterday that we're going to reduce our U.S. personnel in Iraq by about 28%, which is 88, 78% less than it should be. But it's, the question is, what kind of authority would the administration have if it wanted to wage war against Iran? They talk about the 2002 authorization for the use of military force, which allows the U.S. to go after Saddam Hussein, and still using that, and it's absurd. But it's a lot of this is about Congress's fecklessness. Representatives Ro Khanna and Matt Gaetz passed this legislation in the NDAA in July, saying you can't go into Iran without authority. And of course, the managers got together in the conference and just took it out. But of course, that's moot because they still would have to because of the Constitution. But here's a president who was just impeached for abuse of authority, and they give him all the authority to go into Iran and start a war.
But they actually, the amendments, Kahana and Getz have had passed some. It was removed to emphasize it.
Yeah.
But they've already passed it, and they've had like the amendment. It reminds me of the Bolin Amendment,
Yeah.
you know, going on in the 80s because everybody, or the Hawks were, you know, determined that they were going to go in and settle the dispute in Nicaragua. But, you know, I wanted you brought up the subject of the authority to use military force. I just wanted to read, to remind people about what it was. And here's the preamble, which is supposed to summarize the theme and tell us what this is all about. This is a joint resolution to authorize the use of United States Armed Forces against those responsible for the recent attacks launched against the United States. Wow, they're getting ready to attack Saudi Arabia. No, Saudi Arabia wasn't involved. You know, this is the thing, but how many times has it been used? But they use other things. One person was listening, well, if that doesn't work, we have these other things, and then it goes back to presidential powers. Yeah, but presidential powers don't exist unless they've been designated in the Constitution, and it's been said that they don't have this right to do it. That's a prohibition to go to war without a declaration of war.
Yeah, exactly. You know, if Congress wants to clip President Trump's wings, why don't they clip his war wings? The Democrat-controlled House of Representatives could have done a heck of a lot these past 2 years to really reduce the power of the presidency to go to war, but they don't want to do that because they're in on it. They're in on the scam. They're in on the game, and so they'll do these things on the outside, on the exterior, and they may well pay for it. But I just want to say this will be one of our last shows of the year. We'll do a couple more, but we really are approaching the holiday season, the Christmas season. And I just want to take an opportunity to thank all of our viewers as we end another year at the Ron Paul Liberty Report. You know, we've had some real milestones this year. We've passed 200,000 subscribers, more views than we thought we'd get when we started out huddling here in 2015. So we have all of you to thank. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe to the Ron Paul Liberty Report on YouTube. Please go to ronpaulinstitute.org and subscribe to our updates there. Keep in touch with what we're doing. We've got some really exciting plans for next year we're going to let you know about in the next few days and weeks. But thank you for being here with us to enable us to continue doing what we do.
Very good. And I want to just follow up a little bit about the authority and the efforts to start a war with Iran. But one of the moral justifications I get, or to explain why this is so important, is that our position is Iran must respect the sovereignty of their neighbors. Oh, like we do. You know, they should be able to do what we do, shouldn't we? We respect the sovereignty of the Canadians. I hope. I don't think there's any big problem there. But I tell you what. Well, anyway, we've talked about that for a long time about respecting of sovereignty and all the innuendos and the excuses. And once again, I think one of the things to me that has been so disgusting on these impeachment hearings is the dedicated support and love all and determination to follow the Constitution. Well, there's something about that just is a bit hypocritical, but that's not going to change because in a way, they believe this because they have been taught that the Constitution allows you to do anything you want as a government unless it's been prohibited. So all these things as far as they're concerned. But this idea of bragging about their moral obligation to follow the Constitution is total nonsense. And Daniel already pointed out about on war effort, they don't care about it. They just go ahead and do it. So, but that's generally the case, whether it's economic, monetary policy, or foreign policy. The Constitution, unfortunately, has really failed. So we need to do one of two things. We need to have a renewed understanding and a determination to believe what we're saying when we say we should have a constitutional republic instead of a democracy that responds to the dictatorship of the majority and do whatever they want when they feel like it. If we don't do that, we're just going to continue to deteriorate. Today, we mentioned how our ability to offer up our services of national defense for all our clients, and they must be 150 of them in the empire, it's going to be diminished in value, and it's going to come to an end. So we have to think about what are we going to replace it with, and most of the time you can replace it with nothing, other than the fact that people should be allowed to lead their own lives as they please. And that would solve a lot of problems. Think of people's self-ownership, that their life is their own and they can mess it up if they want. And also that what they earn, they ought to be able to keep it. That's not that complex. And also, getting the government out of the business of personal intervention in our lives, that has to be accepted as a principle, which it is, and is getting worse with the cultural Marxists and the attack on freedom of speech. And of course, the emphasis on this program has always been minding our own business to stay out of war, because war is so dangerous and so draining and such an easy excuse to do all these bad things to us. Just think of, anything from the TSA to all the other abuses of personal liberty since 9/11. And the 9/11 was a wake-up call, and we had to attack the enemy. They'd said that. But I didn't realize that the enemy was, from their viewpoint, the enemy was the people of the United States. So we need a reassessment. That's what we hope to do, give a reassessment of the value and the benefits of a government that protects liberty and doesn't try to run our lives and run the economy and run the world. That is the way to achieve peace and prosperity. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.